Good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Welcome to this week's segment of the Hunt for Harmony. I'm James Hunt,
I'm Jaqua Hunt.
and we are here to just share our life experience. We've been married for 26 years and been together 31 years. And we noticed that there's some things that a lot of marriages go through that are very much the same. And we're hoping that with us sharing with you guys that you can identify some things in your marriage that can be corrected to make your marriages better. We are not counselors, ministers, therapists. We're just regular, everyday people who want to share with you in hopes that we help you with your marriages.
What we're talking about today is, what about kids? What about the kiddies? So typically, I have found when I'm talking to people who are talking about getting married or planning to marry, and I start asking them general questions, things that you should discuss before marriage, and the topic of kids come up, and they go, "Oh, I don't know." And I'm thinking, how do you not know? That's a very simple question, and it's a very important question.
Right.
Because if you want 0 or 1, and your spouse wants, or your
Basketball
future
team.
spouse, right, wants a basketball team, then there may be some issues there. There may be some troubles. So if you have found yourself in a marriage already, which we are talking to married people, and you have children, then this is really for you. This is who we're talking to. So we're going to identify some things that we've recognized either in our marriage or in marriages around us, and hopefully save you from some pitfalls, or give you some support in finding your way out of those issues.
Exactly.
One of the key points that a lot of people don't like, especially mothers, I think, is that your spouse should come before your children. And I know you're probably thinking, but a baby needs this, and a kid needs this, and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. But we are to raise our children so that they may go. So if you're raising your children so that they may go, once they leave, your spouse is the one who's here with you. That doesn't mean neglect your children in an effort to, look after or see to the needs of your spouse. But it certainly doesn't mean, and it certainly isn't okay to neglect your spouse in order to look after your children. Which actually brings me to another point in that, is to make sure that you and your spouse talk about how you are going to raise your children. Because I think for us, we knew that we wanted to provide our kids with the best opportunities, the most opportunities, and so that meant a lot of sacrifice on our parts. So we could not get or have or do certain things. It requires a level of unselfishness that both of us were prepared to do. Both of us were prepared to make that sacrifice for our children. That being said, he still came first for me. I still came first for him, because outside of your children, you still have this relationship.
Now, I know some of you have, our weekly listeners, you've probably heard that, a 3 times before. Mm-hmm. But, the Bible says faith cometh by hearing. And it may not have made sense to you the first time, or you were like, this sounds crazy, but as you hear it and we continue to explain different things, hopefully it will become clearer to you, and you will understand it a little bit more.
Why your spouse needs to come first.
Yeah, why your spouse needs to come first. Now, she mentioned that, with us discussing having kids, that it was a sacrifice because we wanted to give them the best of everything, which I'm sure every parent does. Unfortunately, there are some selfish parents. I mean, you see it in the news every day. Mm-hmm. But it takes us to our first point, where you're married, And, you know, when you marry, you have your honeymoon phase. And in the honeymoon phase, you know, people take honeymoons. You know, they go away for 2 weeks, they go a week, a month. And that's time for you and your spouse to bond and get to know one another. But that little honeymoon is not enough time. And it would be very beneficial if having children early in the marriage is put off a little bit so that you can get to know one another very, very well, so that when you bring a child into it, it's not going to disrupt what you have.
Right.
Okay? But unfortunately, you know, we have children early. And it kind of happened to us. And this is our experience. I had to grow to be unselfish, because when we had our daughter, we were married a little more than a year when she was born. And, you know, I wasn't quite ready for that, because when she was born, you know, she got all the attention. You know, she requires attention. And I wasn't mature enough, you know, at that point to say, hey, this is a baby, the baby needs to be taken care of. So I felt like I didn't matter. You know, I felt like, you know, she's taking up all her time, she cares about the baby more than me. And then you become a little bit, not resentful, but jealous. I'd say jealous.
It's jealous.
It's jealousy. So it took me a little time to get to that point. And I know children require a lot, and me personally, I wasn't involved because there's so many other things I wanted to be involved in and do, which kept me from helping, you know, raising the kids. And she said to me many times, she felt like a single parent. So, you know, having kids early is something that needs to be really talked about, to make sure that everybody is ready for it. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because I think what happens with mothers is that even if we're not ready, we don't have a choice. We get ready. We put our big girl panties on and boom, we're mom. Because as he said, a baby needs all of your attention and all of your support. A baby is not able to take care of him or herself. So please talk about that beforehand. Have a plan going in, and don't just talk about it, but do something about it. Because like we've said so many times in the past, if you're not protecting yourself so that you won't have a baby, then you're trying to have a baby. You may not think in your mind, oh yeah, we're trying to get pregnant. But if you're not trying to get pregnant, then you're trying to get pregnant. So make sure that there's a plan going in. Let's say you're past that point and you already have kids, and you had kids, or you started having kids and then you had another kid, like a surprise kid toward the end. And
We're not there yet.
why not?
Okay, go ahead.
So if you, in your mind, you had all these things set up. You knew that, okay, my kids are going to be turning 18, and the first 2 or 3 or however many there are planned, maybe 2 or 3 years apart, and you've got this little schedule planned out. Not that you stuck to the schedule, you know, methodically, but kind of in your mind you had it planned out. And then, boom, you get pregnant again. And so all that time that you thought you were going to have as just a couple again is now shared with another child. And that can be difficult. I think you probably end up feeling the same type of thing, that there's this jealousy because here's this kid. But I think in a way it might be flipped, because as I said before, I think a woman naturally just jumps into that because you don't have a choice.
Right.
But I think it might be you'll find it a little more flipped when the child comes later in the marriage, because the woman has committed so much time and energy and has done this and that, and the man is more mature and at a point where they're not as selfish. and they're ready for that kid. They've learned through the first 2, 3, however many kids, and now they have this last kid. And so I think what I've seen is that they give up their time more freely.
Yeah.
And they're more hands-on.
Okay.
Which could make a wife jealous, because it's like, where was all this 10 years ago? Or you're spending all this time, you're doing all these things, but we still have a relationship.
I agree with that. And two, I know with me, it was kind of like, I don't know how to entertain this little child, this little baby.
He used to always say that.
How do I keep them happy and playful, and how do I do it? I didn't know how to do it. But as they started to get older, I started to be more involved, because now we can do things, and so I urge wives, if you have young babies and young kids, to teach your husband what they need to do. Talk to them about what they need to do.
See, I don't agree.
She's a woman, so she don't understand where I'm coming
I don't agree. Because even when it was told to you, you couldn't believe it. That a kid just, they don't care.
And I understood that.
They don't care. They don't have to have structured events, or, like, okay, we're going to make a train. We're going to make some cookies. I mean, they're not even at that age where they're looking for a structured anything.
And that was my thinking. I was thinking everything had to be structured. There had to be a specific outcome. You have to do
but
this
a
so that you
toddler,
can get that.
Literally, you can go, and they think it's
Again,
hilarious.
I was not in that mindset. But as they got older, we started, like you said, we started spending more time and doing things together, and I started thinking, okay, they kind of like me, As a kid, as babies, I thought they hated me, but they didn't. So, it's just one of those things that you really, really have to consider.
And you have to do it. I mean, it may not seem easy, or it may not seem that, especially if a mom is nursing, get a pump the bottle, pump the milk, put it in a bottle, so that a dad can participate in that process, because it's important for a baby to bond not just with mom, because then of course you end up feeling like my kid doesn't even like me. Every time I try to pick him up, he cries or whatever.
Right.
But that's part of the reasoning for that. That's part of the reason.
So now let's just say that you've had 3 kids, they're a couple years apart, and then 10 years later, you got a little excited one night, and then you end up having another child. Okay? That's a big age gap. And you were already saying in your mind that, okay, these kids are out of the house next year, and it's just going to be the 2 of us. I know. But one of the things that you have to understand, that at that point, wives, they're dedicated. They're devoted to doing it. But in men, I think it can cause some, I think a little bit of resentment toward other people, because they're looking at, okay, Jill and Jane, they're
Jill and Jane.
Yeah, they can go and they can they travel, and we got this 2-year-old that we have to take care of. We got to find somebody to babysit. So, we can't do the things that they're doing. And I become a little bit envious, which really can destroy you individually. And that can roll over into your marriage. Envying what someone else has and what's going on with them.
And the freedom that they have.
And the freedom that they have. And you're telling yourself, man, I got another 16 years of this. I mean, at least when they turn 14, 15, they can kind of fend for themselves, and they can stay at their cousin's house for the weekend if you guys wanted to do something. But, for a long time, that child is depending on you to be there.
Right.
So it can definitely cause you to be a little bit envious, and it can spill over into the marriage where your wife might want one thing, but you're wanting to do something else. And I think it's what scripture was it? It was Proverbs 14:30 says, a glad, peaceful heart gives life to the body, but rot destroys the bone.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're envious like that, it gets you to your core. And why did they say the bone? Because the bone is what's holding this flesh up. And when that rots, when your bones rot, guess what happens? They start to break and you fall apart. And everything just collapses. You need that bone to be strong. So you can't find yourself being envious. You got to make sure that you're doing things to keep peace in your heart. You got to keep praying. You got to keep being involved with your wife and your kids. That's what's got to be a focus. And you can't focus on what anybody else is doing.
Right. And that's just a good rule of thumb anyway.
That's a good rule of thumb. But I went through that. That's why I can say that.
Really?
Yes.
With who? Our kids are not that. Our kids are.
No. I'm just talking about being able to, while other people are doing things, I'm not able to do it because of the kids. But at that time, again, these people were not married people. They were people who were going out, just hanging out, having fun. I was in college. I went back to college late. So, you get these kids and young adults doing things and like, man, I would like to do that too. I didn't get a chance to do that. I want to do that too. But your kids, your wife, they're first. So, it kind of affected me in that way too. I was a little envious of some people. But I grew out of it. I prayed and believed God that, he showed me what was important, and that you never know what these people might have going on in their lives, that might not be, they look like they're good and happy, but who knows what they're going through. But God told me that at the end of all of this, I will still have the love of my wife and my children. And that, when I realized that, I told myself there's nothing that's ever going to keep me from not putting my wife first and doing all I can to stay involved in my children's lives. And I think that makes a big difference, in my life and in our lives. So, yeah.
So what about now blended families? Families where you have children, your spouse has children, you guys are coming together, and suddenly instead of 3 kids, you have 5 kids. Or instead of 2 kids, you have 4 kids, or whatever the case may be. So blended families. And we cannot speak to blended families in that regard because I don't have any children outside of our marriage, and he doesn't have any children outside of our marriage. But on 3 different occasions, we've had a blended family. We've had someone to come and live with us in our family. And so we had to graft them into our family some way. I don't like the term, personally, I don't like the term stepchild or stepfather. I may not be your biological mother or your biological father, but if you are living in my home and I'm taking care of you, I'm preparing things for you, I'm using my energy for your life, then you're my child. So I don't like the term stepchild, step whatever. So I just prefer saying, my child. And when those children lived with us, and it wasn't together, it's 3 different times, I always referred to them as my child. I always said I have 3 children. And like people would say, oh, I thought you had 2 children. And I said, I did. I did have 3 children. I did have 2 children, but now I have 3 children. And I would, say whatever it is. And it was difficult, I think. Well, maybe it wasn't. But at 2 points, the person that came to live with us, the child that came to live with us, was older than my older child. And so this may not mean anything in other people's households, but where you fall in birth order means a lot. Because if you're older, you get certain privileges. So it would knock her down to number 2. And that happened on 2 different occasions. I think in one occasion it didn't matter so much because the difference in years was vast. But in another instance, it was probably 3 years difference. But this particular child that came to live with us, we treated, it was a boy, him like our son. We didn't do for one that we didn't do for all. We didn't require of him anything that we didn't require of our own birth children. So to me, that's how it should be. That there cannot be any schism in your family. If so, that's not a family. So if you are bringing children together, you're blending your family, it's no longer my kids and your kids, it's our kids.
And here are some problems that happen when you blend your families. That could happen when you blend your families like that. One, trying to gain respect of the children. Okay, that's a huge issue because now you're living together and they're following your rules and doing the things that you would like to do because you feel like this is going to benefit them. And sometimes they'll agree with it, but sometimes they will disagree.
They don't.
And they will feel like, oh, you're treating me unfairly when you're only requiring what you would of your own children because you want to see success from them just as well, you know. But that's not what they're used to.
Right.
They weren't used to that structure. They're not used to, you know, somebody else telling them what they need to do. And then if your spouse, you know, if it's your spouse's child and your kid is going and saying, well, so-and-so made me do this, and then she kind of takes the child's side and because that's her child, you know, it can cause so many problems. So first and foremost, you guys have to be on the same page. Even if you're gonna disagree, never let that child see you disagree.
Right.
You know, so, and disciplining a child, you know, those are totally different. She might say, go to your room. I might pop you on your butt a couple times, you know, and she might not like that. Well, that's something that you guys have to discuss. How are we going to discipline our children? You know, and as she said too, you have to accept those children as your children. You should step in front of a train for that child just like you would your child to save their lives. And if you would show a child that kind of love, you know, 9 times out of 10, they will see that.
Yep.
And you will have the utmost respect from them. I mean, we saw a video on Twitter or Instagram on yesterday where this young man, he seemed to be a young adult, Father's Day, he wrote a letter to his father for Father's Day.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You know, he expressed coming into his life, you know, when he needed somebody the most. You know, he needed a man in his life, and the guy was there, and he loved him, and he said he never gave up on him. You know, giving me the impression that this kid has been doing some things, kind of getting in trouble maybe, but that man who was not his father,
not his biological
father, continued to love him through all that, and he just broke down because of the love that man showed him, and he asked the guy to adopt him.
Yeah, so that he would legally be
his father. You know, so, and that's what we have to do. That's what you have to do if you have a blended family. You know, love those kids, you know, to the end.
As your own.
Through good and bad, you love them.
As your own.
As your own.
Yeah. And then finally, growing apart because you have children. No, I shouldn't say because you have children. Because you've allowed your focus
to be the children.
Right. And not your marriage. Yeah, I'll clean that up. So once you get to a point where, you know, you're celebrating your freedom, And I don't know. I don't understand that, because when my child was graduating from high school, my second child, I was excited. I mean, people were saying, "Aren't you sad? He's going away to school." And I'm like, no. And I wasn't just kidding. I was so serious. Not because I wanted him to be gone, but because I knew I get my life back. I don't have to go to another Thursday night basketball game, Tuesday night basketball game, Friday night football game, track meet, whatever it was. I didn't have to do that anymore. My time was being reclaimed for myself. But the second reason was because my college years were like the best. And I wanted both my kids to experience that for themselves. So I was excited when it was time for them to go off to school, because it was just an awesome time in my life.
And you wanted to be an awesome time.
And I wanted to be an awesome time in their lives as well. But I was like stoked. I was thinking about, and we were thinking about, okay, we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to do this. We're going to eat this and have that.
I was a little sad, I'll be honest.
Yeah, he was a little sad. He was a little sad. But for me, I mean, I thought, hey, this is a great time. They're embarking on a new phase in their lives,
Right.
and in many ways, we were
Doing the same.
yeah, doing the same, kind of getting back to that point. But I don't know why, how, grace of God, years ago, I think we realized at some point, and I think, some marriages, if you're blessed, you have somebody else tells you, or you realize it, but at some point we realize, okay, our kids are going to be gone in a little while, so we need to make sure this is solid, because the last thing you want to do is on the day that you're dropping your final child off at school is to look back around and say,
what are we going to do
"Hi,
now?"
my name is Joshua. Nice to meet you. And actually, one of the messages that we got, was it this week?
Yeah.
One of the messages that we got this week was from a person who they've been married for several years, and they have adult children, and I think they're both retired, and they don't know one another, and they have changed. But they're at a place now where they're trying to decide if they want to accept who this other person has become, because they weren't there for the process. And now all of a sudden, who is this person? You never did that. When did you start doing that? Because they weren't there for the process. And so you grow apart.
But the fix to that, though, there's a fix.
There is a fix. There is a
And
fix.
what you have to do is you have to approach this as if this is your girlfriend or boyfriend all over again when you first met.
So go ahead and introduce yourselves again.
You know why you married them.
Right.
Obviously you love them.
Right.
But because people change over the years, and if you're not there with that change, then that change could be something that you just don't like, or just don't understand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you have to date again. You're gonna have to start saying, "Hey, baby, we're gonna go every Tuesday, Thursday night. We're gonna go dancing, or we're gonna go out to eat, or we're gonna go to a movie, or we're gonna do something together. We're gonna sit and talk." Because that's what's got to happen. In order for me to learn what she has become, and for her to learn what I've become, we got to talk about things. We got to get our views. Let me see her views on things and my views on things, and then that flame will kind of be rekindled, and then you just start throwing wood onto the fire, and then boom, hey, you're doing your thing. And you're loving one another and enjoying one another. But it's work.
It is work.
And as she's said before many times in many segments, work. When it gets time to
do the heavy lifting,
put the hammer on the nail, you got to do it.
Got to do it.
Okay? And it's not going to be great to start out.
And it's going to be awkward.
It's going to be awkward, but that's what's got to happen.
And don't get caught in the trap of, we shouldn't have to do this.
But you should.
But you should. You do, apparently. You do have to do it. Don't get caught in that trap that we've been married for X number of years. We shouldn't have to get to know each other. Well, guess what? If you have been cohabitating for the last number of X years and you don't know your spouse, then yes, you do. You have to spend that time getting to know them again. And let me just also mention right here, we weren't going here, but I just thought about this. Love is a choice. So just because you have hit a rough spot with your spouse doesn't mean that there is not still love there. It doesn't mean that you haven't invested time and energy into this relationship. It just means that, you got to pick it up. So love is a choice. You have to tell yourself, remind yourself why you love this person, why you got married in the first place. Because it's a very good chance that those qualities and those characteristics are still there. People act ugly when they're unhappy, when they're angry, when they're resentful. People act ugly. But if you can figure out, or remind yourself, I should say, if you can remind yourself, I love this person, I want my marriage. So what do I need to do? How do we begin? And it's going to be awkward. It's going to be awkward initially. But schedule those times, stick to those times, and do something. Like he said, whatever it is. It could be just going to the park, taking a walk,
Cooking together.
cooking together, cleaning together.
Cleaning together.
It's just doing something
Together.
together
Yeah.
on a regular basis, consistently.
Right.
And then you'll start to see some differences because you'll start to get to know this person again.
Very well said. Very well said. Well, we've taken up enough of your time.
Yes, we have.
And we want to thank everybody for viewing. We definitely want to thank any of the new viewers.
Yes,
We
thank you.
appreciate
And
you
welcome.
tuning in, and welcome. And hopefully we'll see you again and with the next segment, or you will see us in the next segment. So please share, like,
And comment.
like, and comment. Please, we would love to hear your comments, your thoughts, anything you would like to discuss, problems you may be having. Send us a private message, okay?
Yeah.
We are here to try and help you identify some things to improve your marriage, and we expect you to do the same for the people around you. So please share.
Share.
All right? And we will see you next week, same time, same channel, 7:30 on Instagram and Facebook. Yeah, I kind of messed it up. I did it much better last week. But hey, Instagram, Facebook, The Hunt for Harmony. We thank you. So have a good night. Bye.
Bye-bye.